Our next speaker is online. This is, if I pronounce your name right, Anelda Nomalungelo. I'm going to talk about a movement to highlight the importance of research software and the people who develop it. Actually, this to me is a very important subject because it's very difficult to attain research software scientists at all of our institutions. So please go ahead.
Thank you very much. Good morning, esteemed conference delegates. It's such a great privilege to be here today. We'd like to thank the organizers for this opportunity and specifically for making it possible for us to present virtually. So let's delve right in. If you're a researcher involved in software development as part of your work, this is really an exhilarating time to be doing what you are doing. I really hope this presentation will spark new enthusiasm, unlock opportunities, provide links to potential solutions for things you've been grappling with, and connect you to peers globally. Clicked on the link. I'm Anelda Nomalungelo. I'm the director of a consulting company, Telarify in South Africa. And today we're going to take you on a whirlwind journey showcasing exciting developments in the global research software landscape. Nomalungelo Mapanga, my colleague, will then zoom in on what is happening in Africa and how you can benefit and get involved. To get us started, let's define the term research software. In 2021, the FAIR for Research Software Working Group, which is similar to the FAIR for Data working groups, defined research software as source code, algorithms, scripts, computational workflows, which we've just heard about, and executables created during the research process or for a research purpose. This is distinguished from software that includes operating systems, libraries, and dependencies used in research, but not created exclusively for a research purpose. To help you appreciate the extent of focus placed on research software in the global north over the past decades, I will share some highlights from the research software timeline. Most importantly, I want to highlight a 2014 study which showed that from 10,000 academic job adverts, 400 were related to software development, and these positions had 200 different job titles. And that was already in 2014, so you can imagine what has happened since on the job market. Let's pause here for a moment and think about what your job title is and what percentage of time you spend on developing research software as we define it here. Early advocates for researchers who develop software realized they couldn't create a movement for something that doesn't have a title. And so the research software engineering role was born. And throughout this presentation, you will see the acronym RSE, that is Research Software Engineering. I won't read through both these slides, but you should notice the number of organizations whose primary purpose is to understand, support, and improve the research software ecosystem. Some of these organizations operate nationally, while others have regional reach, and groups such as the Research Software Association, the International Council of RSE Associations, and the Global Research Software Funders Forum operate internationally. One of the most recent and exciting developments for research software stakeholders everywhere is mentioned in this tweet from last week, and controversial as the platform may be at this stage, I still thought it would be useful to include it here. The tweet is jam-packed with interesting information, which we will be unpacking the elements of in the next 20 minutes with Norma. According to the OECD International Survey of Science of 2018, a staggering 25% of international research produces new code. And I think in this audience, there are a lot of people who are part of the people who are developing this research software. In the Global Research Software Engineering Survey, which has been running annually or biannually since 2016, by the Software Sustainability Institute and collaborators in various regions across the world, the people who develop research software have these characteristics. So they are typically PhDs, 40% are not professional software developers, 20% have had an industry job before, 50% are part of a dedicated research software group, at an institution, 53% work as sole software developers or in a team of only 2, and 49% use open source licenses for their code all the time. The same survey shows the sustainability of research software is under serious threat, with over 57% of projects having a bus factor, which is defined as a project being completely, or a measure of the number of developers who understand a specific software project and could, with only a cursory review of the project, maintain or extend the code. So a bus factor of 1 equal to 1 would mean the project is completely reliant on only one developer. So this study found that 57% of projects have a bus factor smaller than or equal to 1. This is fascinating information for project managers, funders, researchers, research software developers, research management, and more. And these little nuggets are just the tip of the iceberg in terms of what we know about the global research software landscape. Various questionnaires go on to ask about training, disciplines, job satisfaction, career opportunities, and languages of choice, which is a controversial topic in some spaces, testing and debugging, to name just a few topics. But the question is, how does this information relate to Africa or South Africa? What do we know about the African research software landscape? In 2017 and 2018, Clarify collaborated with the Software Sustainability Institute and a handful of other South Africans, including Peter van Houston from Zambia, who may be quite well known in this community, to customize the international RSE survey for the South African context. By 2018, we had managed to get 29 responses from Africans, but in 2022, it was down again to 2 respondents from the continent. To be very honest, we haven't made a huge effort of marketing this in that time, mostly due to other factors coming into play. So this is despite the growing number of research projects with strong research software development elements in a wide range of disciplines across the continent. There are unfathomable opportunities to benefit from, to build on, and to contribute to globally developed resources in the research software space. Let's look at this tweet again. For example, over the past decade, others have been canvassing for policy change and recognizing the importance of research software and the people who develop it. So much so that world-renowned funding bodies are taking it serious enough to participate in a 2-day workshop in Amsterdam to develop a declaration on funding of research software sustainability. And that declaration is now available, or the draft declaration is now available online, and it is open for feedback, for input from the community. So please take a look at that. Now I'll hand it over to my colleague Nomalungelo, who will tell you how you can benefit from and contribute to this global movement. Thanks, Norma.
Thank you so much, Anelda. And thank you so much for setting me up and giving some background information. Good morning, everyone. As Anelda has introduced me, I'm Nov Emerald and I work with her at Clarify. And so the question that she asked is, what are you going to do to improve the African research landscape, make it sustainable and make it visible? And what we'd like to do today is invite you to join the RSE movement in Africa and beyond. So before I can go into that, let us maybe tell you a bit of what has happened in Africa and mostly in our space. So this is a timeline of what has happened from 2015 until now. So in 2015, that was the initial involvement of Clarify, where we got involved in raising awareness of RSE. This was done through carpentries and also with visits to the Software Sustainability Institute, which is in the UK. In 2017 and 2018, we formed new collaborations with Peter van Houston at Sanbi, and we also continued the work with the SSI. And then in 2019, Peter van Houston and Eugene de Beste started RSCC Africa, which I'm going to talk about in the later on in the presentation as well. And this year in 2022, Telarify reignited or helped to reignite RSCC Africa. And we say reignite because that project was affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. And what Telarify has done over the months is supported to bring it back to its feet as we build a community of practice. And there's also something exciting, a mapping project that we're doing, which I'll also talk about later in the presentation. Okay, so the first thing that you can do to get involved in this movement is to make your voice be heard. And this is important, and I'll be hammering again on the importance of being part of this movement, because this is important because you will be helping to shape policies, funding, research by sharing your information. And there are varieties of service that you can enter your data. One of them is what to fund. So these are funders all over the world who look at what research projects or research software projects should be funded. And then there's also usability and design in scientific open sources and software projects. And there's also the International RSE survey. So the next iteration should be coming through in 2023, and we will give you all the information to know how to get to these surveys. The slides are available, so you'll have access to the links as well. And then the second thing that you can do to be part of the RSE movement in Africa is to join our local community. So this is RSCC Africa, and it stands for Research Software and Systems Engineers. So this one is specifically or a unique forum for Africans, and it's basically a platform where we share resources, we share knowledge, and help each other grow. And the extra S is slightly different from RSE. We're not doing anything different. We're not reinventing the wheel. We are just adding what we have seen is unique to Africans and what is needed. So the extra is for system engineers, and this is, for example, data storage and computational infrastructure designers and developers. So as I mentioned before, RSCC Africa was funded in 2019 through an OLS project by Peter van Houston and Eugene de Bester. And you don't need a membership. You don't need to pay a membership fee to be part of it. And you can read more about it on the RSCC Africa website. So what do we do in this community? So in this community, we raise awareness of RSE because we've realized that a lot of people are RSEs, but they don't even know. So we raise awareness of RSE. We share knowledge and resources. So knowledge in research, if you want to learn or grow in a certain area, that's the kind of knowledge and resources that we'll be sharing. We share our work and we collaborate. And this is very important to us because we've realized that there's so much beautiful work happening in Africa, but no one knows about it. There are so many silos, people doing the same thing over and over again, not aware that there's someone else doing that work and maybe could collaborate with that person to make their projects even better. The other thing that we do is showcase African expertise. Once again, there are amazing people doing amazing work in the continent of Africa. And one of the things that we do in this community is make sure that we show what is actually being done in Africa. And also the other thing that we do, we help to connect African RSEs to the global community. And this is also through knowledge sharing, pointing them to resources and whatever may be happening, especially in the global north. Right, so what do we do in this community? So what we do, we have an online forum. This is a place where you can ask questions, you can share information, you can meet peers. I've mentioned or I've spoken about collaboration. So this is a platform where you can start doing that. And then we host a channel within the International RSE Slack workspace, so you can join us there. And then excitingly, we host monthly meetups to showcase your work and learn about resources and opportunities. So this year, mostly in our meetups, what we focused on was really understanding what RSE is. So we invited a lot of folks from the UK, from the SSI, from RSE UK, because they are the ones who started the movement. So we invited them to our talks, and they all are recorded and they're available on our YouTube channel. But they were talking to us about more of the journey of RSE to help us really understand what it is. But next year, and maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but next year we are all about sharing the work that is done in South Africa in Africa, we are bringing in African RSEs to hear what our communities. And we have a new feature in our community. We have a newsletter that you can sign up to, where we will be sending monthly information, which we think will benefit the community. And the third thing that you can do to be part of the African RSE movement is to help us to map the RSE landscape in Africa. And I will talk about how you're going to do that, but I want to start with why this is important. It is important to showcase African expertise. We are a continent with a variety of amazing research, amazing software, and it is important that we show this expertise so that we are able to compete on a global scale. And our work will help to influence policies and also create awareness of African research software projects that are happening so that we can potentially get funding, get international collaboration, and learn and grow, right, through this awareness. And also our projects will inform funders on the kind of funding that is needed for projects in Africa, and again, to connect with potential collaborators and mentors. And I'll be speaking a little bit more about mentors later on in my presentation, and to prevent duplication. It is not wise to go and do research on something that someone else is doing, the exact same thing. It is much better to say, hey, you've been working on this research. How about we collaborate? I need this data. How do we share this data? It saves time, it saves money. And this is why it is important for us to be able to see who is doing what in the African continent. Right, so I will tell you a bit more about the mapping project that we're doing. So in 2020, RISA started mapping RSEs in the global north. And then in 2020, they extended that to map the global south. And I will show you some stats that are very shocking. I think this is not a slide later, but what Telarify is doing in partnership with RSCC Africa is to map RSEs in Africa and in South Africa. And the purpose of this really is to expand the global mapping, to build and grow an active community of practice in Africa. Because as I mentioned before, there are so many people all around Africa doing amazing work, but we are in silos. So we want to build an active community of practice where we can share information, share resources, provide training for one another, collaborate. So this project is part of an OLS project, and OLS is a mentorship program. OLS stands for Open Life Science, and you can read more about it on their website. So basically, we'll be mapping RSE communities, research software projects, organizations, research groups, and training providers. We have written a blog post about this project, so I'm not going to get into too much detail. And we also have a GitHub repository that gives you more details of the project. Okay, so now the shocking stats that I was referring to just now is the mapping that took place in 2022, mapping of the global south. They found, or they were able to map only 39 communities in Africa. And I think we can all agree that this is not the correct representation of what is happening in Africa in terms of RSE. It is shocking to see that there's only 4 entries from South Africa, there's only 3 from Namibia, there's only 11 from Nigeria. There is so much happening in Africa in the RSE space, and that is why it is important for us to get mapped. Next slide, please.
4 more minutes, please.
In South
4
Africa,
more minutes.
Thank you, noted. In South Africa, we have the CSIR SANBI RSE at SUN, which is in the Stellenbosch University, and UCT mapped. Okay, so we'd like to invite you to add your data. We are expanding on the work that has been done by RISA. If you would kindly scan the QR code, it will take you to a form that you fill in, and the information that we need in this form is research shopper project information, any organization that is RSE, research groups, research communities, training, RSE training, and other that you feel fit into what RSE is, Research Software Engineering, or in the African context, Research Software and Systems Engineering. And we'd also like to join you to join our local community to sign up for our newsletter. If you scan this QR code, you will be able to get to the sign up for the monthly newsletter. And finally, we'd like to invite you to spread the word about the African RSE movement. And again, if you scan this QR code, you will get access to a document that will give a summary basically of my part of the presentation, explaining what we're doing, why we're doing it, and why it is important to be part of this map. We'd like to acknowledge in their absence, the people that have collaborated with us, Peter van Houston, whose work we are building on, Michelle Barker and Paula Martinez from RISA, members of the UK RSE community who joined our community meetups and also advised us on how to go about our meetups, and members of the RSEC community for being part of the community in 2022. And from the OLS training and mentorship program, we'd like to thank the organizing team for accepting our project, and our mentors, Eddie Steele and Joyce Kiowa from Germany. Right, if you would like to get hold of us, you can get hold of me or Anelda. Our email addresses are on the slides. You can check out Telarify on LinkedIn, follow us on Twitter for more information. And if you want to get in touch with the RSEC Africa team, the contact details are displayed on the slides as well. All right, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you in the community. We are available, Anelda and I are available to take questions if there are any.
Okay, thanks a lot. Let's thank our speaker. It was another excellent talk on research software engineering. Does anyone have any questions?
Thank you very much. Just to congratulate Anelda and the team for trying to map the continent and collect data about some of this very critical. I was in Dallas with Birali and others, and I think the session that he just talked about regarding reproducibility talks to professionalization of two entities and two personas: the data steward, the research software engineer, and bringing this to the mainstream in research and in university. So I'm just curious from Anelda's presentation, what is the effort and discussions that are being had regarding professionalizing RSEs? I mean, from a university point of view, you'll be thinking there are some key performance indicators that an RSE would be promoted against. From the RSE's point of view, there is career progression. So I think these are pertinent issues that I think the dialogue that they're having will really bring some input in directing this professional. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Actually, I have a question which is essentially about the priorities from research software engineering. My perspective comes from a national lab. I'm at Oak Ridge Lab, where all groups have researchers, they have software engineers in each group. Yet there's a research software engineering group. What are the priorities and how do you help everyone build better software? And that really lends itself to more reproducible software, meaning how do you get from all the data to information? So what's the priorities here in Africa?
Thank you very much for the question, Chiama. Let me start by trying to address that. So the work that has been done in the UK and elsewhere in the global north was specifically about professionalizing the job of that has researchers developing software, because what they found was many times these people are employed on short-term contracts, on soft funding. The research groups can't keep them because they go back to industry because of job security issues, and so on. So that's why they created this name, research software engineers, not because they think that's like everyone that does this work is a research software engineer per se, but because they needed a name to take forward and build this career around. So I know in the UK, they've gone up to the House of Commons to get this recognized as a professional career. And they work really, really hard to get KPIs and other things aligned so that research software engineers are not measured in the same way as a researcher in a lab or a researcher who's we're not necessarily developing software, but mostly supervising students and publishing papers are measured on. I've got another link in these slides, which I see I've pasted the wrong title, but the second last link is how do we assess candidate RSE jobs from the Software Sustainability Institute as well. And there's a lot of resources for people who are employing RSEs or RSE type people to understand how to write job descriptions, how to measure performance, what to put on KPIs. There are also a forum for the research software engineers, group leaders, where you can discuss with other group leaders who manage software developers within the research landscape. So there's a lot being done in that space. And I think that is one of the primary focuses of the original RSE movement. The question from the host of the session, I don't know if that was addressed to me or if it was addressed to the audience.
It was more to you, actually, in terms of the priorities. You can go everywhere and try to say, we're going to put research software engineering into every piece of research software, but you want some priorities in order to focus to get better software in certain areas. Does Africa have any focus, any concentrated areas that you're going to say in climate modeling, or where's the focus?
Great. So I am definitely not working on an African level in terms of policy or focus. I'm merely the messenger. So what we do is we create awareness of what's happening in RSEs. But I know that at the recent Research Software Funders Forum meeting that took place in Amsterdam earlier in November, we had representation from the National Research Foundation. We had the Open Science for Africa Foundation, something like that. And we had a representative from the NICIs, the National Institute for Cyber Infrastructure, at this Funders Forum in Amsterdam as well. So we hope that as people are becoming more aware of the importance of research software engineering, research software, and the people who develop it, these conversations will start to percolate into research management, research funders, government, and other places, so that the priorities can be set. But I think at this stage, the term research software engineering is still very new in Africa. Our community is very, very small. The active participating community is very small. And that is why we're running the mapping project, to create awareness and find the people who could benefit from being part of this community and who could contribute to the global and the African conversation and help set the priorities.
Thank you very much, Anelda. I thought I should chip in there to also add on to a very fantastic answer. There is a great vision in the continent through the African Open Science Platform, of which I am the incoming director, hence I'm sticking my neck out on this question. I think it's very critical, the question that you're asking. If you look at the AOSP strategy, it's got 4 pillars. One of them is to create a network for training in data and information. And the other is to create a network for open access and dialogue. And the other 2 pillars, one regarding infrastructure access, and the other regarding developing a data science and AI institute. And I think the conversations that we're having here are quite pertinent. I missed the workshop in Netherlands because I was actually in Leiden for the Fair Convergence Symposium, where there was a launch of Fair Connect regarding professionalizing data stewardship. And I think from the ASP point of view, the issue of collaborative projects in the continent across domains, you're asking about priorities. One of the key things is how can, as a continent, work on projects collectively on various domains, obviously to perpetuate open science principles. And the areas like genomics, for example, presents a very good opportunity to tease out some of the challenges regarding open science. There's a very exciting project funded by the NIH, DSI Africa, Data Science Innovation in Health. And I think already when they unpack that project, they're already teasing out some of these very interesting challenges. The area of astronomy is very, very important due to the SKA project, areas like Earth observation. So indeed, if one was to prioritize, we really should be looking at those projects that already have galvanized us to work as a continent and use them as a test bed for really looking at some of these areas. So I thought maybe I'll just come in and do a cameo regarding what ASP is. Indeed, we will be creating these two networks. We'll be very, very keen to work with communities already having a network around some of these issues so that we can propagate them in the continent. Thank you.
Okay, well, I think this session's coming to a close. We had two excellent talks. We should thank both of our speakers, or three, I should say. So thank you.